Hello, welcome to this YouTube webinar on how parents can support the student with dyslexia at second level. My name is Wyn McCormick. This is one in a series of 9 webinars. It is the only one specifically for parents. Most of the others are for teachers. However, I would recommend that you would watch the webinar on how dyslexia affects the student at second level first. The challenges facing the student at second level are different to those at primary, and this can take both the student and the parents by surprise. While I've been a guidance counsellor and a special ed teacher at second level, it is my experience as a parent of 3 sons with dyslexia that has led me to get so involved with trying to improve things at second level for students. That experience as a parent of students with dyslexia, although now some decades ago, helps me understand the challenges that parents face at the present time. I've been there. I know how hard it is for parents and students. As always with the webinars, the links I mention will be found below the YouTube video. There are many strategies and resources mentioned during the presentation. Parents who are watching will be at different stages of education from senior primary to senior cycle at second level. What I suggest is that you have a pen just to note any key strategies that you might use at this particular moment, so you can finish with some practical ideas that you could put into action now. So the topics I'm covering in it are how parents can help with organisation, reading, vocabulary, memory, writing, self-esteem and educational choices. And just now at the beginning, I'd like to draw your attention to 4 videos available on YouTube. The first is the video Fat City. How difficult can this be? The FAT stands for frustration, anxiety and tension. I use a couple of clips from this when I'm giving in-service in schools, as it puts teachers, parents and psychologists into the situation where they experience difficulties similar to those experienced by the child with dyslexia in the classroom. They have to walk in the steps of someone with dyslexia, and I find it really makes people take notice. I showed it on a parents course once, and the mother rang me specifically the next day to say that she had cried the whole way through it. She now knew what it was like for her son. It is very old. You'll notice that immediately with hair and clothes styles. They also use language we wouldn't use nowadays, such as learning disabled. It's 60 minutes long and it has 12 sections. I would encourage all to watch it. Next is Left from Right, which is Irish produced and is Irish people talking about their own experience of dyslexia. Then Dyslexia Explained, what it's like to be dyslexic. Nice little video, 7 minutes long. And more geared perhaps to the child at primary level. It is a cartoon and it's very funny, as well as explaining dyslexia. And lastly, See Dyslexia Differently. In 3 minutes, it explains dyslexia and also gives very positive examples of how people with dyslexia have changed our world. Just some advice as we start. As parents, your most important task is to ensure home is a safe refuge, and no matter what the difficulties they encounter out there, there is always understanding and support at home. You can't do everything. Choose the most appropriate tips for this particular moment. This will change over time. At one stage, they might need help with organisation, and then later it might be planning of written work. If you try to do everything, it can be exhausting. I know this, I've been there. It can make you feel quite tired, and the child can be tired from the demands of school. So if a night comes along and it looks as though there's going to be an enormous battle and clash, avoid it. Write a note to the school and explain why homework wasn't done. A huge row benefits no one, neither the child nor yourself. Act as an advocate. Know what is available and, importantly, if the child meets the criteria for such support. Also ensure that teachers know about the dyslexia. There is a huge difference between primary level, where there is one teacher who knows everything about the 30 students in our class, and second level, where there could be up to 12 or 13 teachers involved with one student. Many of the strategies talked about in this webinar will be of help, not just for school, but for life. When someone with dyslexia finds something that cuts through the confusion and helps them, they hold on to it for dear life and will take it into further education and work. Neurodiversity is a concept gaining ground since the 90s, and it's now well established. I see it as a very positive development in promoting understanding for people with ASD, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, etc. It says that people experience and interact with the world in different ways. There's no one right way of thinking or learning a behaviour, and maybe in the past education was geared to one right way of learning and behaving. Differences are differences, and they're not deficits. Different people think differently because their brains are wired to think differently. There's a link here to an RTE article on neurodiversity if you'd like to read up more about it. One idea that can help students with dyslexia and other learning difficulties at second level is dyslexia-friendly school policies. Niall MacKay, in a piece in Dyslexia, Successful Inclusion in Secondary School, says dyslexia-friendly policies enable schools become more effective and improves the performance of all pupils. This is the power of the dyslexia-friendly approach. The changes made on behalf of dyslexic students benefit all. This is a very powerful statement. Sometimes teachers might say to me that the demands of the curriculum in school are so much they don't have time to do anything extra for the child with dyslexia. With that statement that MacKay makes, the teacher doesn't have to do extra. They just have to use dyslexia-friendly strategies, which will benefit all students. In his later book, Removing Dyslexia as a Barrier to Achievement, he gives many invaluable practical ways to be dyslexia-friendly in a classroom. I recommend that staff rooms would have this book available to them. He says students may have learning differences, but it's when they're not catered for that they become learning difficulties. He stresses the importance of removing stress and anxiety as they are key impediments to a child learning in the classroom. Among the many invaluable practical suggestions in the book, he shows how language can be used to boost a child. For example, the word yet is one that conveys hope. If students say they can't do something, the reply could be, you can't do part of it yet. He stresses that happy, secure learners learn, anxious learners do not. A key support is to remove stress. As I said in the introduction to this presentation, I recommend that you would watch the presentation on dyslexia at second level first. It looks at the very different challenges facing the student with dyslexia at second level in comparison to primary level. Here is the list that I discussed in that presentation, and you can see how wide-ranging it is. Every student will be affected in different ways. In the study skills workshops that I did with students over many years, as an icebreaker, I would ask them how did dyslexia affect them, and we made up a list similar to this. And then I gave them one vote and asked them to identify the difficulty that affected them most. In over 90% of the workshops I ran, the same difficulty came to the top of the list. And that was something unexpected, which is memory and learning. They had a mixture of the other learning difficulties, but getting material into long-term memory was the one they identified as key. Most people don't think of this when they consider dyslexia. At second level, I've always seen the key challenges are access to the content of subjects, then communicating what you know to others, then making the right educational choices, such as the choice of subject or the level of subjects, and then continuing development of literacy and numeracy. This is different to primary, where literacy and numeracy would be key. Here are some ideas on access to content. Firstly, if they can't make legible, clear notes, how do they get notes? Teachers may give them notes, and this has happened more since COVID. And then what I did when my lads were in school, and what I did for students in school, was to photocopy the notes of a student who made good notes. It meant they had the means to learn the key points. Also, revision books are a great help, and I'd recommend them from first year or fifth year. What I look for in revision books is that they are more accessible with bullet points, numbering of points, less text, highlighting of key words and concepts, colour, diagrams, bigger print, dyslexia-friendly fonts, and plenty of space on the page. Digital copies of textbooks are very useful, where the text can be read aloud as the student reads, and this leads me to the amazing resource of Bookshare Ireland. It was set up by the NCBI, who are now called Vision Ireland, and the Department of Education. It has 1.3 million books available in alternative formats for people with vision or print difficulties. Print difficulties is dyslexia, so students with dyslexia have access to this huge resource. Alternative formats include audio with the highlighting of words in the text or larger fonts, and the textbooks are now available through it. And then tapes, videos, podcasts can help, and multi-sensory teaching and learning. The more senses used when they are being taught and when they're learning, it helps to get information into long-term memory. Assistive technology is a great help. First, I show you the reading pen here. It can be attached to headphones, and as you scan text, it will be read aloud to you. There are two versions, an orange one and a white one. The orange one is an exam reader. It only reads aloud. It can be used in the state exams if the student meets the criteria set out. The white one allows students to scan material into the pen and download it that night to a computer, and that way they could make notes without using handwriting. They are available in the library service, but I think there are waiting lists. And then if you're interested in finding out about assistive technology, I have given two links. One is the Dyslexia Association of Ireland and the second is the British Dyslexia Association site. One of the ways to make access to content easier is to use a dyslexia-friendly style. Here I'm referring to the Dyslexia Association guidelines on inclusive communication and the British Dyslexia Association's recommendations on typefaces. Links are given to both. The DAI guidelines are 3 pages long and make the following recommendations. Under writing style, short sentences, avoiding abbreviations and acronyms, short words and terms where possible, avoid jargon. Presentation, line and a half spacing with wide margins, justified text. Use bold to highlight rather than italics or underlining, and then bullet points rather than prose. With fonts, using a sans serif font such as Calibri, Arial, Veranda, with a minimum font size of maybe 12 or 14. Avoid unnecessary use of capitals. Increase the spacing between letters, and then paper could be coloured, cream or off-white or even matte. The British Dyslexia Association suggestions about typefaces would say that good ascenders and descenders, so the letters that go way above and way below the line, should all be very clear. That B's, P's, Q's and P's would be distinguished and not mirror images of each other. That there would have been different forms for the letter capital I, lowercase l and the digit 1. And I'd say there also 0 and capital O. And that there should be letter spacing so that letters like R and N can't run together to look like M. There are fonts designed specifically for people with dyslexia, which incorporate many of the suggestions from the BDA. I give details of two of them here, Open Dyslexic and Dyslexia. Open Dyslexic is free, but they ask for donations. Dyslexia is also used on Chrome extension, which allows you to read any website in Dyslexia font. I said the two key challenges at secondary were access to content and then communicating what you have learned. So, to communicate, using tapes, computers, mind maps, alternative forms of homework will all help the student to communicate their knowledge. Reasonable accommodations in exams where the student uses assistive technology to help with communication is of great benefit. Here's an example of why I stress the importance of access to content and communication of learning. This is some notes from a student going into 6th year. He has just been assessed, and it will be no surprise to you that his spelling is in the 2nd percentile. However, his other abilities were in the 90s and 80s percentiles. He is someone who received a lot of support from early on in primary. By 2nd year, we realised the most effective supports were to ensure access to content and communication of what he knew. No matter what we did on spelling, it had little effect. He did 4 higher level subjects in his leaving cert. Of course, they were not the likes of English or history, etc. His strengths were in the sciences and technical subjects. He achieved his higher level grades and went on to get a level 8 degree at college. His spelling is probably still problematic, but assistive technology will provide a solution to that. Communication with the school is very important. As I said, a big difference between primary and secondary is that primary, there is one key teacher who knows everything about the child. At secondary, the student may have up to 12 or 13 teachers, from subject teachers to a tutor, to a guidance counsellor, to a year head, etc. Ensure each teacher is aware of the profile of the difficulties. You might have sent in the details prior to the child starting in school, but don't assume that this will come to the notice of all teachers. Send in a copy of key points to each of the teachers, and if a teacher is absent for a lengthy time, send it in to the substitute teacher. Always let teachers know if the child is stressed or if homework is taking too long. They won't know otherwise. A strategy which I found helped me and which I've recommended ever since is to agree homework times and the environment in August prior to the term starting. Things like agree the mobile phone will be turned off and homework will be done at a desk. They'll be excited about starting 2nd level or going into 3rd year and will be open to making agreements like this. And then in October, if things aren't running to plan, it's easy to point to that agreement and reinstate it. Check that they understand homework comprises of 3 elements, written, learning and revision. They often think that written homework is the most important because they can get into trouble if it's not done. But actually it's the learning and revision that matters when it comes to an exam. Help them organise their work area with all the necessary equipment. Monitor homework. Help them with organisation and filing. However, don't do the homework. You might help with elements such as planning an essay or setting up a revision plan or hearing learning. The reason I say not to do the homework is that teachers need to know if they're not coping. You could also help them set up a realistic homework and revision timetable. And when I say it's realistic, it's got to be one they will keep to. Here I've drawn up a suggested homework timetable. It has to be realistic, as I said. I've come across so many students who would have a fantasy homework timetable that they never keep to. It also needs to reflect what goes on in their life. This one is for a first-year student, and it's good that there is a routine. So they should be planning to do their work at the same time in each day, except maybe for the Tuesday night when they have sports. I like them to identify a particular slot at the weekend. Too many students spend the entire week notting. In other words, not doing their homework. They start on a Friday and they say they'll do it, but it's the weekend and they give themselves an out. And then they'll say they do it on Saturday morning, but as typical teenagers, they sleep in. They have sports Saturday afternoon, so it goes into Sunday. But then there's a family visit and they end up doing it on Sunday night. But it has been in their head the whole weekend. Much better that they have a defined time to do it and the rest of the weekend is free. I've also included in this timetable subjects for revision. Say after midterm in November with 6 weeks to go to the exams, they may allocate subjects to particular nights and ensure that they cover all their subjects once at least during the week. The next two ideas to help are one, having a master revision plan, and secondly, using SMART goals when learning. Here I give an example of a revision master sheet. These students can feel overwhelmed and anxious about how much they need to know. They can feel it like a black cloud over their head and they've no idea of its size. And they are anxious. This is an attempt to change that. Take a first year student coming back after midterm in November. There are 6 weeks to go to the Christmas exams. They ask all their teachers what's coming up in the exams. They have a single sheet of paper where they list their subjects across the top and then what is coming up. Now that black cloud has been quantified. They know the size of the task ahead in revision, and this reduces their anxiety. When they sit down in the evening to study, having allocated particular subjects to particular nights, it helps them be much more organised. They don't have to waste time. They have allocated subjects to a particular night, so it's Monday, they will study the next item, which is science and maybe home economics, and they mark it off. And as the weeks pass and they see that they are making progress, it'll lead to a dramatic reduction of anxiety. They will see that they will cover their revision by the exams. The students on the workshop thought this was a brilliant idea. They were not doing it, even though some of them were leaving cert students, and they saw the benefit of it immediately. Many students I dealt with over the years, if they were given a chapter of history to learn, what they'd say to themselves is, well, I'll take 30 minutes and I'll read it over 3 times. And at the end of that 30 minutes, the good readers would have a fair idea about it, the poorer readers would have a less good idea about it, but it would begin to fade quite quickly. Instead, I prefer that they would use SMART goals. SMART goals come from business and they talk about being specific and measurable and achievable and realistic and time-based. But what it means is this: in the same 30 minutes, they would set themselves the goals. I will find out 5 causes of the Reformation, 5 facts about Luther, and 5 beliefs he had. And I'll test myself at the end. That type of targeted learning will stay in their mind longer. And again, the students on the workshop liked this idea. Here are some ideas to help with homework. Use the homework journal for 2 things. One is to take down the homework so you know what it is, and then to pack the bag for the next day so that you make sure you have the correct books and copies in. It can be a little tip to put the subject names in the night before. It may save them a couple of seconds in class. They should have one diary or a master file for everything in their life so they don't double or treble book themselves. And then using colour to help with organisation can help. Here's an example of using colour. The student could make out a coloured timetable. Now with the colours there, he doesn't have to read all the words on the timetable, and he could do 3 copies of it, one for the wall at home, one for the locker and one for his homework journal. The colours become the colours of the subject. So he puts a yellow tag on his maths copy and a brown tag on his English copy, and it will save him maybe 20 seconds, but it's 20 seconds 9 times a day when he goes to the locker and sees 20 copies and he has to pick out one. And it will save him time at home as well. His notes for maths are in a yellow folder. His notes for English are in a brown folder. And then I would also encourage them to ask the teachers to spell their name on the board and put it into the timetable, because I think that for many students with dyslexia, they know the teachers as sir or miss, and when the parent-teacher meeting comes along, they won't be able to tell you who the names of the teachers are. And it can also help in a big school to put the room numbers. And the last item on this is filing. Okay, some ideas for filing. Have a file for each subject. It could be a loose leaf binder with the label on the back and different colours so they can identify it easily. An index of the notes in the front with the topics and the dates. And they would file by topic and then date. They would always file their pages flat. They would never fold them. Otherwise, they could have a mound of notes that have to be unfolded for them to see what they're looking for. A timetable could be put on the front of it, which might help, and then the back of it could be used for keywords or spellings or timelines in history or definitions in science, key information they need. I mentioned some books by MacKay earlier in the session, and now I'm talking about one called Taking the Hell Out of Homework. It could help with study skills and is a rich source of ideas and strategies to help the students complete homework more easily and with less stress. It's also a book for parents and carers who are desperate to help their children with homework but aren't sure how to do it. Simple strategies and tricks of the trade are presented and easy to use, and it's from age 6 to 16. To help students develop their reading skills, some of these ideas might help. Encourage them to read at home, perhaps 15 minutes a day. It will develop reading speed, stamina, comprehension and vocabulary. And reading is such a key skill. It is like running a marathon. You can't go and run a marathon tomorrow, but if you train bit by bit, you will get there. My lads would say they had the disadvantage of having a teacher as a mum. They read 15 minutes a night after homework. At an early stage, if they did not, I think that their reading would have gone back about 6 months over the summer. When reading for pleasure, they should be able to read about 90% of the page easily for it to make any sense or for them to enjoy it. Let them choose the books. So it might be graphic novels or comic books such as Tintin, or books in a series, anything. You could use audiobooks on car journeys for books that their friends are reading but they're not, but it gives them access to the same stories, such as like Harry Potter. And then there are the high-low readers. High-low readers are books with adolescent content and a lower reading age, and they can have a great sense of achievement when they finish a book. Here are 2 places to access such readers. Barrington Stokes specialise in dyslexia-friendly books. I show some of their titles here. And then Penguin have graded readers at 8 different levels. The SQ3R is one of a number of reading methods, but it's probably in the top 3. It's based on the concept that comprehension is improved if you are in the zone before you start to read something. So it says, when asked to read a piece, S, survey it. Look at the headings, the subheadings, the pictures, the last paragraph to get a general concept of what it's about. Then raise questions about the information it contains. Then you read it, the first door. The second door is when you come back and you recite the answers to the questions. This helps get the information into long-term memory. And then later on, come back and review it, which is the third door. This is a reading method that could become a life skill, and it could be used at college and in work. Visual stress is a perceptual processing condition that causes reading difficulties and headaches from exposure to patterns in text, such as lines of text. Sufferers can see print distortion. Text could seem to shimmer or move, and tiredness when reading. What can help with visual stress are some of these. There can be rulers with translucent colour and a black line to keep the eye on the line being read, or coloured overlays, or coloured writing materials. Individuals might have a preference for the colour that helps. Here are some of the suppliers for the equipment for visual stress. ABC School Supplies in Letterkenny. Eason's and Mr. Price have coloured A4 pads. I noticed this year that for the first time Eason's had a part of their website was dyslexia friendly school supplies, and then Crossbow Education in the UK. Lastly on this slide, Immersive Reader in Microsoft will read text aloud. It'll change the colour of the background of text, the type of text, the size of the type, and increase the distance between letters and words, etc., and the number of lines displayed. It is free. Here are 2 sites that might help with Shakespearean plays. The links are given. Spark Notes have short videos of some of the plays, and the student could revise the play by watching the video. Shakespearean English can be difficult for the student with dyslexia as it is very old-fashioned. In lit charts, you have the Shakespearean English on one side of the page and a modern English translation on the other. Dyslexia Action in the UK have these 2 resources. One is Dive In, a guide to choosing books for the reluctant reader and readers with dyslexia, and the second is Reading Hints and Tips for Parents of Struggling and Reluctant Readers. The links are given. TTRS, Touch Type Read and Spell, is a multisensory structured online typing program teaching touch typing. It is based on Alpha to Omega, the phonics method, and it's designed to help with reading and spelling and writing difficulties and dysgraphia, touch typing, literacy and memory, and is available from the libraries. Library members can access it on the internet. Moving on to vocabulary and spelling, some ideas which might help. Dictionaries with the alphabet on every page are available for English and other languages. This is very useful for the child who cannot automatically remember the alphabet. For dictionaries that don't have it, use a bookmark with the alphabet. They could keep a vocabulary notebook for different subjects, and then they could make a short list of the words they find most difficult, such as perhaps the names of the artists in the history of art or the names of the characters in novels, and they could go over this list the morning of exams. I would always recommend teachers would, when introducing new long words, write them on the board broken into syllables. It helps the student remember how to say them. If there are words that they really need to remember, mnemonics can be a help, such as there is a rat in separate. But a huge help, and the students on the workshop really loved this, was Latin and Greek, plurals and meanings. On the workshop, I would ask the group the plural of the word fungus. Some might know it was fungi, but for most they felt there was just chaos. They know you add S to some and ES to others to make a word plural, and then you have this really unusual chaos. And I would show them that there's a table here of 9 plurals coming from Latin and Greek. The bottom one is US. It turns to I, so fungus becomes fungi. The second from the bottom is so bacterium becomes bacteria. This made sense to them. And in particular, they need it for Leaving Cert Biology, where there are so many Latin and Greek words. Up to 70% of English words comes from Latin and Greek. Knowing the roots of these words is particularly invaluable for students with dyslexia for 2 reasons. The students learn best when they see patterns and understand what they're learning. And then, many do not read for pleasure and as a result do not have an extensive vocabulary. They often come across words they don't recognise. Giving them an understanding of the Latin and Greek words, roots for words, helps them to see how a word is constructed, how to pronounce it, how to guess at its meaning, and a tool to help in spelling it. For example, the ending side means killing, so it might be easy for them then to understand words like homicide or infanticide or herbicide. The Latin and Greek roots are particularly useful for students taking biology in Leaving Cert, as there is a huge amount of vocabulary in that subject and most of it originates with Latin and Greek. Knowing the roots can help them make sense of it. I attach a link for one of the many sites that gives those roots. These are students who need to learn in a planned, structured, consistent way. Cramming does not help. It can lead to being overwhelmed and anxious, and in some cases their mind can go blank. They learn with patterns and understanding. Rote memory for the likes of Shakespearean quotations or science equations can be very challenging. They may know it the night before, but it becomes vaguer by the next day. Here are some memory techniques that might help. Multisensory, learning using as many senses as possible. DVDs, tapes, podcasts might help here. Also, for some students, they learn by writing material out, or 2 of my lads learned by saying it aloud. And that's what copper fastened it in their heads. Others recite something and may pace up and down at the same time. Getting the big picture, having an overview of the subject and where this particular piece of information fits in. It makes sense of what is to be learned and makes for a better use of time. Mind maps and graphic organisers help by reducing the amount of words and making a visual pattern. Colour can be useful here. If the students learn with a clear structure, it helps them write much better answers. Here's a graphic organizer from the PDST booklet. The visual memory of the Venn diagram and the inclusion only of keywords will help get this into long-term memory. I think it could be improved with a bit of colour as well. Here's another example with a mind map. 3 pages of science are reduced here to key relationships and words. And it has helped that I've put a mnemonic in at the top with the 5 key elements of the soil. Here are some memory aids. Mnemonics are a memory aid where a word or sentence is made up with the initials of the key points. Here are examples of mnemonics. Fat Dad for the counties of Northern Ireland, or Homes for the Great Lakes in the States. Another one is Richard of York gave battle in vain for the colours of the rainbow. Having these prompt the student into remembering the full amount of information. Grouping and visualization also help with memory. For some students with dyslexia, there is a limit to the amount of separate items they can remember. One way to handle this is to break the information into groups. So if there were 10 items on a list to be learned, break it into 2 lists of 5s. Here's an exercise I did on the Study Skills workshop with students. I put this slide up and I gave them 1 minute to remember as many as possible before taking it down. And then I'd ask them to count how many they could remember, and usually the average was between 5 and 7. Then I did the same exercise with this list of different items, but this time it was broken into 3 groups. Their scores usually doubled. Breaking it into groups really helped. And then with this list, we looked at other ways to remember. One was to make up a mnemonic. For example, TTTT SSSB for the bathroom. A key way to remember it would be visualization, making a picture in the mind that would aid recall. For the first group of items, they could see the garden with the grass, the daffodils, the roses, and with the equipment lying on the grass. The picture stays in the mind and makes recall easier. Use of colour in the images would also help, such as if you were doing a diagram of the heart, using red to show the arteries coming away from the heart with oxygen and blue for the veins. Family games can help develop memory. Possibilities here might be card games or quizzes like Brain Box. Students could make out their own flashcards. Study Stack and Quizlet allow them to be done on the computer. Both will have sets that are already in existence, or the teacher or the student could make out their own set. Here you have a list of the words on one side that the teacher has put into Study Stack, and then a list on the other side of the flashcards and games that could help. Oka Books is a company in the UK set up by the parents of a child with dyslexia who found it hard to access textbooks. They publish revision books and games in science, French and geography. I know it is the English curriculum, but there would be some degree of overlap. They also have board games in the sciences, and also this book on how to write a great essay. At the end of the day, however, it comes down to overlearning and hard work. The student with dyslexia may have to put in more time and effort into getting material into long-term memory. Moving on to writing. Firstly, if handwriting is poor, what can be done to improve it? The idea here would be to look at it to analyse why it's difficult to read, and then give them one suggestion for improving it, such as closing your O's and your D's or keeping the backs of your letters straight. Get them to try that for a few weeks and then see if there is another improvement they could make. Then, do they understand the question being asked? There are 2 parts to this. One is, do they understand the words used in the question, like compare, enumerate, illustrate, etc.? And then have they looked at what the question is asking them to do? Here is a question we used on the Study Skills workshop for students. We asked the students to plan their answers in key points. We realised that they did not see the structure in the question that teachers see, and so often their plans were rambling and off the point. Here we taught them with colour and numbering to break down the structure of the question, so now they could see the 3 points, and immediately they could see the relevance when they were planning their answers. Such an analysis of the wording of questions would help across all subjects. If they are brainstorming to come up with new ideas in their answer, they could use post-its, and then all they have to do is rearrange the post-its to structure their thoughts. You could help them with the planning of written work and getting their ideas into order. By working together doing it, you are showing them how to do it in the future independently. Sometimes they find it difficult to write enough in an answer. The use of writing frames or outlines could help, such as when they're describing a scene, to make up a sentence for each of the senses: what you see, what you hear, what you smell, etc. The next is a great idea I got from a tutor of students with dyslexia, and she suggested that they would make up a character in great detail. They'd know about the clothes, the music, the career plans, the friends, the good habits, the rows, etc. Then, if they were asked to write a short story, they would have someone they could put into that short story. They don't have to make all the details up inside the exam. Lists of points would prompt longer answers, such as when writing about someone in history, think about the clothes, the weapons, the religion, the houses, etc. The next slide shows some ideas about humour and drama. Here are two lists that I made up on humour and drama. If they were asked if a piece of writing is humorous or if a piece of writing is dramatic, when armed with these checklists, they would be able to decide if any of the points were there and they'd be able to write about it. The last point here is that graphic organisers can help with planning work. Here's one that could be used for a debate type answer. You list the points for, against, and the grey area of maybes. Here's another that would help in writing an evenly planned essay from the start to the conclusion of an event like a sports event. I refer to the fact that some students with dyslexia have low self-esteem earlier. They have faced such difficulties in such an important area of life. Here are some ideas to help foster self-esteem. 1. Praise for genuine achievement. They're very capable of realising if they get praise for something that doesn't deserve it. Then a genuine interest in what they're doing helps. You could promote activities that give success and competencies, such as sports or drama or music or interests, anything that gets them involved with other people. And it's much easier to do this when they're 12 or 13 than later on when they are teenagers. Positive examples of people with dyslexia can help, and here are the names of some famous people with dyslexia from the Dyslexia Association's Information Hub. You'll recognise some of the names, I'm sure: Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, Jennifer Aniston, Leonardo da Vinci, etc. I have spoken about ensuring all teachers know about the student's dyslexia. Sometimes sports coaches may be overlooked. They also need to know the profile of students with difficulties. Otherwise, they might assume reading and writing skills, and it might lead to embarrassment for the student if they can't do something the coach asks. The student needs to know about their dyslexia at an appropriate level. At 12, they don't need to know the full details. But by 17 or 18, they need to know their profile of ability and the strategies that work best for them. Then, importantly, there could be frequent reassurance that school life is only part of life, and there are many, many paths open to them. I mentioned a book here, Dyslexia: A Teenager's Guide by Sylvia Mooney, which might be of help, and it is in the library service. The Dyslexia Association of Ireland run Dyslexia and Me workshops at venues throughout Ireland. It covers what dyslexia is, self-esteem, resilience, and it's interactive and it's fun, and it's at 2 levels, senior primary and junior cycle. And they're held at venues throughout Ireland. You'll get the details on their website. Some of the key educational choices are subject choice, language exemptions, and reasonable accommodations in exams. Subject choice is of critical importance for students with dyslexia. Students with no learning difficulties may have individual preferences for subjects, but are likely to do equally well in a variety of subjects. Dyslexic students, due to their uneven profile of ability, may do exceptionally well in some subjects and find others very difficult and face failure in them. Below are some of the issues to consider when choosing subjects, particularly for the Leaving Cert, which is such an important gateway exam for 3rd level courses. Languages. Some students may face difficulties in the study of languages as they have had in English. Phonics, spelling, sequencing of words, learning vocabulary all pose difficulties. If obliged to take a language, they may drop to ordinary level, whereas they would take the higher level in another subject. Language exemptions may be useful here. Maths may pose difficulties for some. One thing to be conscious of is that project maths tends to be very wordy. A psychologist friend told me of a student who said to her, if they put maths into English, there would be uproar, but they've gone and put English into maths. So if a student is struggling with maths, check if it's the maths or if it is the wordiness of the questions. Subjects that require answers containing factual information may be easier than subjects in which answers are in essay-type format. Therefore, geography, business and physics might be easier to achieve in than English or history. Subjects that require a large amount of rote learning or the learning of many unfamiliar words may pose difficulties. Possibly home economics and chemistry might be easier than the likes of biology. The student may have strengths in visual spatial skills and could do well in subjects like technical graphics or art or technology. And then continuous assessment is of benefit, particularly for students with short-term memory difficulties. So subjects that have marks going for the projects, the journals and the practical work are of benefit. Irish is a compulsory subject in schools. The Circular 55/2022 sets out the criteria for the exemption in Irish. It states that the student must be experiencing significant literacy difficulties across the curriculum and have a standardised score in reading, word comprehension, spelling at or below the 10th percentile. It is the school that does the assessment for the exemption. The certificate of exemption granted at primary will carry on through secondary and on to third level. If the student is exempt from the study of Irish, what happens during Irish class time? In bigger schools where there are enough students exempt from the study of Irish, it could be that another subject is put on, which is an excellent solution. In other schools, it might be that this is the time for additional teaching support and the student will be withdrawn from the Irish class for it. Again, this can work well. And then in some schools, the student is left at the back of the Irish class, and sometimes they do their homework during this time, and it can mean that the parents can find it hard to monitor homework. I would prefer, if they are at the back of the class, that they might be given books to read to develop their reading skills, or else use TTRS to develop touch typing. Of course, not studying Irish can have some career implications. For example, they won't be able to become primary school teachers as there is an Irish requirement for that. If they have an Irish exemption, they can apply and get the NUI exemption from the study of a third language. I'm going to talk about it in the next slide. It is not a Department of Education requirement that the study of a third language is compulsory. However, in some schools it is a core subject and not an option. In other schools it is an option. The National University of Ireland, NUI, comprises of the universities of UCD, Cork, Galway, Maynooth and some related colleges. And they have an entry requirement that students have 6 subjects, 2 at higher level, and include English, Irish and a third language. However, there has been some breakdown in this, as some faculties such as science, engineering and nursing don't require a student to have that third language. If the student has a Department of Education exemption from the study of Irish, they are exempt the Irish requirement. In this case, they can also apply to NUI and get a third language exemption. If they are not exempt from the study of Irish, they can apply to NUI for a third language exemption. The criteria is the same as the Irish exemption, that is, the 10th percentile. Trinity and the University of Limerick have a 2-language requirement and students can apply for an exemption from those. These exemptions are critically important for the student in the Leaving Cert, which is an important gateway exam to third level, and it allows them to take their preferred subjects in the exam. Many students with dyslexia don't qualify for these exemptions as their literacy is above the 10th percentile. They may still have difficulties with languages. Take a student whose abilities are in the high 90s or 80s in percentile scores, but their verbal scores may be in the 20s or 30s. This may affect their ability to study languages, and yet they have to take languages to keep all their options open in a very, very competitive gateway exam. Students I have known personally have had to take all 3 languages at ordinary level and then take extra subjects in order to have 6 higher level subjects. I would welcome change here. Why does Irish have to be an obligatory subject at senior cycle? Could it not be made an option? Why does NUI still require students to have a third language as an entry requirement? You don't need a language when you're studying medicine or veterinary, so why make it a requirement for those faculties? Students should be able to take their best subjects and compete on a fair basis. Help at exams is called reasonable accommodations or RACE. What is available includes reading or reading assistance, the reading pen, the use of a tape recorder, the use of a word processor, a scribe in very limited circumstances, an exemption from spelling and grammar elements in the language subjects. Extra time is not available for students with dyslexia in the second level exams in Ireland. Many dyslexic students need access to this sort of support, as timed exams may provide barriers for students with dyslexia and other learning difficulties. In other countries, extra time is an established option for dyslexic students at both second and third level. In France, students with dyslexia have access to 33% extra time, in Italy 30%, and in the UK 25%. Key points on race are that the school assesses the eligibility for the junior cert. There is no need for an assessment, and the school testing takes priority over an assessment. There are criteria that the school must apply. Reasonable accommodations for the junior cert will be reactivated for the leaving cert if the school confirm a continuing need. The explanatory note is put on the certificate of results. In some schools, students are assessed for race in third year. However, if a student is eligible for race, I believe that it should be available in house exams from first year on. It can make a considerable difference to their performance. It is difficult for schools to have adequate resources to do this, however. I learned the importance of providing these accommodations early, decades ago. A student got 11% at Christmas in first year. The teacher asked me what mark to give. Would she give an E? She knew it would affect his confidence. And then she said he had worked well all term and had contributed in class. So we decided to give the test orally and take his answers down. He went from 11% to the mid-60s. It happened again in science and geography. It made a huge difference to him. Here is one way parents can act as an advocate. If you think the child meets the criteria for race, ask about it in first year. As I said, there are very specific criteria for race. I give a link here to the criteria for 2025. Here are some examples. For a reader, a standard score of 85 or the 16th percentile or less on a word reading test, and either a reading inaccuracy of 7% or more on exam papers, or a reading speed of 89 words per minute on an exam paper. For the waiver of spelling and grammar, you're back again to a standard score of 85 or the 16th percentile or less on an approved spelling test, and spelling, grammar, punctuation, error rate of 8% or more in scripts under examination conditions. If you're looking for further information, one place to go is to the Dyslexia Association's website and their hub and their Adult Dyslexia Hub. And I give also the link to their YouTube webinars, which include webinars on self-esteem, the transition to secondary, and 6 study skills webinars. In conclusion, I hope you found some of the resources and strategies useful. It can be difficult at times. I know that I found that back when I had my lads at school. At times I thought they would never make it, but it does happen over time.